PodSaaS, where we're putting the SaaS back in sassy. Sponsored by LeadrPro, where you can book demos with target customers on demand and fill your sales pipeline instantly.
Welcome everybody to another episode of PodSaaS. Today we have Roy Dekel from SetSchedule. Welcome, Roy. How are you doing?
Hello. I'm great, Chris. Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. Thanks for joining us today. Actually, you guys aren't too far away. You're based in Irvine, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's California.
Nice. We're up here in Santa Monica, so next time we'll have to do this more in person. But yeah, very cool. Awesome. Before we get into what we like to do, a series of rapid fire questions, just to get to know your personality and who you are and your journey. Love to get a little bit more insight around SetSchedule. So if you want to give us the quick elevator pitch and also who your target customers are, that'll be great in terms of getting us some context around the business.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for the question. I appreciate the leading question, Mr. Chris. Okay. I'll give you the shortest version, and then I'll give you the shortest and the shorter version of our basically elevator pitch, which is a vision statement. The shortest one is if LinkedIn and Twilio had a baby, they would name it SetSchedule. And for those of you that don't necessarily know what Twilio does, I would assume that most of us know what LinkedIn does. We essentially looking at SetSchedule to create communities of professionals that are connecting with their prospects more efficiently using technology at economical scale. And basically, the hypothesis behind it is that we're addressing the solopreneurs and the SMBs, the really small plus / medium-sized businesses, and we're enabling this solopreneurs and SMBs to grow their business through either lead acquisition or through networking. And that's what the SetSchedule app does. Inherently, what defines our DNA and the way that we started this crazy journey was basically in the space of real estate. So our current target demographic and clients that also pay us and use the system on a regular basis, as we call them, the anchor clients and the anchor users, are real estate agents, brokers, and teams. But the expansion is growing from there with the introduction of the new SetSchedule 3.0 app that we rolled out last year.
Got it. And is it a marketplace? Are you guys connecting realtors with their customers, or are they using your tool to then reach out to customers in a more effective way?
So it's like I said, the LinkedIn plus Twilio equals SetSchedule. What it is pretty simplistic. 5 years ago, or actually April of 2018 to be more precise, we introduced the first app. And the first app, we called it the Referral Radar. And what a referral radar is basically is a marketplace. It's a sophisticated marketplace of online leads that we aggregate from the biggest name in the real estate space. I mean, Zillow.com, Realtor.com, Trulia, you name them, they are in the referral radar marketplace. And that was the first app that we introduced in 2018. 40,000 agents later, and obviously a couple of years later, we've expanded that into more of a collaboration and a networking community technology that enables people to also control the narrative and publish, network, and basically prospect on their own, utilizing prospecting tools. So the marketplace is still there, but there's an expansion to that.
Got it. Okay. Very cool. Awesome. I'd love to dive a little bit more into that in a little bit. But again, before we do that, I want to get to know you as a person a little bit more. So if you're ready, we'll go ahead and dive into those questions.
Okay, ready.
They're not crazy. They're pretty light, but I think it's been useful in terms of just understanding kind of the founder journey, because I think a lot of people are really curious about that. So to kick things off, a very easy question. Do you have a favorite entrepreneur or a favorite startup story? It could be either or.
Well, I mean, if I have to pick one, I would go with Elon Musk. I know it's super cheesy because he's at the top now, right? And everybody wants to gravitate towards the top. The reason I pick him, do I need to explain it, or good? No,
I would love to hear an explanation for sure.
All right. Number one, immigrant. Came from South Africa.
Yeah.
Number two, I truly believe that he has some biological challenges, that it's not just the ADHD that he himself admitted he has, and he overcomes that obstacle. He's not generally speaking, socially accepted from normal, UI standpoint. I respect that. He overcomes obstacles, and he's constantly ultra creative. I think he speaks his mind very honestly, and I don't think it's just for PR purposes. It's very well defined with what's important to him and what's important to him, the problems that he's solving, and that's what I respect.
Very cool. Yeah, he's a good one, but he's somebody definitely we hear a lot of. But yeah, for sure, I like the explanation because it gives us more context as to why, and that's very helpful in terms of like understanding, what your perspective is. So, second question is, what did you want to be as a kid? Like the 8, 9, 10-year-old range.
CIA officer.
CIA officer.
So I actually did something close to that. Obviously I was born in Israel and I served in the Israeli naval warfare, went through the equivalent of the SEALs Academy and Officers Academy, specializing in intelligence and so on and so forth. So quite frankly, during my childhood, I either film director, producer, or really getting into the intelligence community.
Wow, interesting. Now you're here. That's cool. What's maybe like one of the most, it could be like a painful experience, but what I like to call like learning lessons. So like something that you experienced or went through that you learned a lot from. And usually a lot of those things are coming from like uncomfortable situations.
Well, for me, it's easy because my dad told me that when I went to the military, I went through 2 series of boot camp because I actually started in the Army and then I moved to the Navy, the naval warfare training, SEAL training. And I did 2 boot camps. And my dad said, well, if you did that, the moment you did those 2 boot camps, I said, oh, shit, I know you will be perfectly fine. Right. So I actually, when I was 18, I made that choice of picking more difficult paths because I just was excited about them, not just for, not because I'm vain or for notability purposes, but rather a personal achievement goal. So I went through the hardest, obviously, training that everybody knows about, whether, through obviously SEAL training, marching, swimming, diving, all the stuff. So, without zooming in, I can just basically on a granular level can say that I've learned so much from the training. And primarily I've learned that if you want something badly enough, you can get it as long as you put your mind to it and you don't quit the moment you have to do. And that's my study.
Awesome. I love that. Starting a startup is hard. Starting anything from scratch is hard, right? And I'm sure that your back has been against the walls more times than you can probably count. So what motivates you in like that 25th hour to overcome hurdles or obstacles that are in your way?
The same thing that drove me to sign up for the most difficult course in the military. Yeah. It's the achievement of what is perceived impossible. It's the achievement of which is perceived unique, successful. That's what it is. Obviously, in the entrepreneurial world and the business world, you're set to address a certain problem, and that problem becomes the North Star and your compass for everything that you do. And as you said, during the 25th hour, when you look at the map and you realize that you're still on course, that's what drives you to keep going forward.
Yeah, for sure. So that'll lead me to my next question, which is, what has been one of your biggest accomplishments, either personally or professionally?
Well, the template-based answer is my parenting abilities. My 3 kids is my biggest accomplishment. The 2 boys and the girl, it's the biggest accomplishment, right? Yeah. Now, I love them to death and they know it, but I will step out of the template-based answers and I'll say, the ability to build something from nothing and all of a sudden have 220 people following the mission statement and carrying the flag, basically the set scheduling around set schedule, that would be probably the primary success.
Got it. And the 220, is that your employee headcount now?
Yes.
Wow. Congratulations. That's an amazing feat.
Thank you.
Cool. Do you have a favorite war story from SetSchedule? So from the infancy days, I think I read is like 7 or 8 years old now, or somewhere in that realm, right? Maybe it's like 5 years ago that it's kind of like felt more like a real business. But what do you have a favorite like story of one of those growing pains experiences that you guys have gone through?
Well, there are many. obviously.
Yeah.
And going back to my buddy Elon Musk, right? He says that running a startup is like chewing glass and staring at the sun every day, right? And I agree with that. So I have plenty of stories, but if I have to choose one, I guess I'll choose the most relatable, especially for
Okay.
entrepreneurs, which is capital raising, right?
Mhm.
When you go on capital raising, you actually going on unsolicited advice raising crusade. You're going to hear so many people telling you, I wish you were this. I wish you had six fingers in your left hand. I wish this, I wish that, right? So I mean, we had VCs that said that our name doesn't make sense because we're not a calendar technology. What is that schedule? We went through so many different cycles of wanting to introduce to raise institutional capital at the early phase of the company in the first couple of years, and we had our net worth, and we had gracious friends and angels that put in the initial funding of the company, but it was by no stretch of the imagination major. It was pretty small. So we bootstrap, and only in recent years, when we propelled ourselves to basically hit the category of a middle market company, we started to raise venture debt and credit capital. And subsequently to this, we all of a sudden start to get all this interest from the major players, especially on the growth side, that are wanting to introduce capital and institutional capital to the company. And it's kind of funny to see how they're all of a sudden believe in the concept and the validation of the concept. And to me, I mean, I find that sometimes it's inauthentic and sometimes it's a little bit hypocritical. But it's just the nature of the beast. And the war story in that regards never ends, right? I mean, it starts at early phase and then you negotiate at the private equity level. And to me, that's a very interesting war story that we are very successful with.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Very cool. Going through the motions and just not trying to hammer home this point, but it is hard to start a business. And even, getting to where you guys are now, I'm sure you still endure some high stress situations. Is there anything particular that you do to decompress?
I don't know if it's good for the podcast. My answer is alcohol, but and I ask these questions in interviews that I actually still take. But more specifically, is wine.
Yeah.
I love red wine. That's
Awesome.
to me the go-to.
Yeah.
But also it's going to sound super funny, but showers. Shower is where I think and where I get creative, right? In a good way, and workout.
Yep. Nice. Those are good ones. Seems like you've gone through a lot of different experiences and when you start your business too, like you're typically wearing a ton of hats. So has there been any skill set that you've picked up along the way that you either loved or hated while wearing multiple hats?
Well, I don't know if it's a skill set, but one thing that I really hone in on, and there are multiple investors actually that preached that in the past, and there are a lot of articles that talk about that too with notable entrepreneurs, is I really perfected the art of time, of optimizing time management. And it's kind of funny. My co-founder and I, Udi, talked about it recently, and then we said that if I get stuck in traffic, let's say on the way to LA, right, which is an hour north from Orange County, I would actually turn around and go to the office. I wouldn't sit in traffic if I fail to plan it correctly, because it is more efficient for me to sit here and talk as opposed to be in a car and spend 2 hours driving to a destination to achieve exactly the same result, only in person. So there's benefits to the in-person, there's benefit to remote, but ultimately time efficiency and time optimization, that's the skill set that I developed. And sometimes it's also your downfall, because when you get to the personal life and you try to optimize the time you put into a movie, when you go out with your wife or your girlfriend or your significant other, it becomes very, very tedious or unpleasant sometimes. So you have to be able to turn it off.
Yeah, no, I feel you 100% on that one. So it's like, it's great for professional optimization, but when you go back and it's really about the quality and not like the efficiency of the time that you're spending with the individual, right? It's I've heard that complaint a couple of times on my end for sure. That said, I like to think about, I think looking at life in totality. So, things that we get during this consciousness that we live during what we call life is, there's a lot of things that I personally have on a bucket list of things I want to go out and do. Some of them are maybe super ambitious. I'm curious if you have any like really ambitious items on your bucket list that you'd like to share?
On the personal level, the easiest go-to is I want to go to all of the 3 Michelin star restaurants across the world. And then if I do the 3, I'll go to the 2. That's kind of like the main bucket list. Nice. I want to go to all of the English-speaking countries. And, obviously there's a whole lot more, but that's the shorter version of the answer.
That's very cool. Those are worthwhile endeavors.
Thank you. I think so too.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. That's not just a bucket list. That's like living life in conjunction with accomplishing some of those items. So awesome. And the last question I have for you is about the idea of legacy. And I think sometimes it hits like a good note, sometimes it hits the wrong note. But more importantly, in a different way that I've learned to try to phrase this is like, what kind of impact do you want to leave on the world?
That's a phenomenal question. I think there's a big difference between the single guy and the married guy, or the single guy and the parent guy. Also as an entrepreneur, I mean, my compass and map and North Star is how I define the legacy to the next generation and even the next generation. So I'm actually working on generational skipping trusts, right? I mean, so my thought process is, how do I treat it and how do I treat the next generation personally? But obviously from a business perspective, which is parallel to that, I analyze and think about all of the stakeholders in the business that started this venture with us, with myself, with Udi, with Shayna, with the team. And really what's going to be their outcome in terms of their generational skipping trust, figuratively speaking, plan, how their employee incentive program and their stock or in a company is going to define their retirement and beyond. And to me, that's really what drives me. So that's on the business side. And obviously, ultimately, from the nerdy aspect of how do we want to redefine the categories such as real estate and real estate adjacent, and the way that we shape the lives of solopreneurs like real estate agents in South Alabama, right? And how we redefine their connection with a mortgage broker and the ability to create an economical scale for them to grow their business and at a 7% cost basis, grow their business. To me, it's a very important direction. So it's still very entrepreneurial and very family oriented, less granular on obviously the global warming problem, but that's kind of like how I view the legacy strategy in my personal life.
Got it. Nice. Well, that's it for the rapid fire questions. So, I want to go and perhaps like dive into a little bit more about your professional experiences before SetSchedule, right? I wasn't able to find too much in terms of like on your LinkedIn and stuff. So I'm curious, was SetSchedule something that you did like straight out of, when you immigrated here, or is it like, did you go through university? Did you have a few odd end jobs before this? Or was entrepreneurship always just on your mind and this is like your first venture and endeavor and just hit the ground running?
Yeah, no, that's an awesome question. The short answer is, well, first off, like I said, I was born and raised in Israel, and I spent most of my time as an adult actually in the military, in the Navy, and as an officer. So close to about 5 years in the military. And when we left the military, I traveled the world with the little to no budget that I had. So, we were spending $7 a day being in nowhere and tents and camping. But then I stopped in LA, and the long and short of it, I met my wife, fell in love, met my wife, and started my life in LA. And I think there's an immigrant and that came from the Israeli military, right? I mean, your options are limited. I didn't have the budget to get into USC and write a $60,000 check. So for an immigrant, and that's why I respect Elon Musk with his transition from South Africa and really other entrepreneurs that did very well abroad and here. Your option is probably better suited to if you get to sales, where you write your own ticket per se, or you basically get into business development or business, right? So I obviously gravitated towards sales and realized that I can do very well with business development and sales. And I realized that being sales with kind of like the abilities of operational management basically create the entrepreneur. And that's how I got into entrepreneurship. I went through multiple failures. I crashed and burned. I made bad mistakes. I partnered with bad partners. I had my fair share of bad judgment calls. And at the end of the day, ultimately, SetSchedule defines my success. But before that, I was in a space of real estate investing, and finance management. And that's actually where I gained the insight into the real estate world and the entrepreneur world through investments.
Got it. Okay. How long did you spend in that world, trying the real estate game, financial investment game before starting SetSchedule?
So there were basically the triangle of threes. I'd say the first benchmark was when I came to the US from 2002 to 2008 was really everything that has to do in the space of construction, real estate development and improvement and home improvement, residential investments. Then I got into finance in 08 all the way to 13. And that's what I did, finance and fund management, real estate management. And then from 14, that's really the evolution of where the idea to develop a technology and a technical solution for solopreneurs with a primary focus in real estate and real estate adjacent started, and that's SetSchedule. So that's kind of like the three benchmarks, I'd say.
Okay. And that was what year again? You said 2013, 2014? 2014. Okay. Got it. So how do you take this leap? I mean, I know you're getting some entrepreneurial skills. I think a lot of people like realtors, financial advisors, like when you're in that space, you have to build your own book of business, right? Like, I get that skill set can translate over, but then how do you make that jump? Because it is like a risky jump to a certain degree, to say like, hey, I'm going to leave this world and then go and start this from scratch. Like, do you make that decision almost immediately, or is it like a gradual progression where, SetSchedule starts off as like a side project and then evolves as you start getting more validation?
So I'll answer this question the way that I would probably explain my son, right? I mean, because he comes to me and he's 14 and he asks me, how am I going to cover rent, right? And what should I do? And I said, look, in the first couple of years, you're going to work for someone and you're going to gain some experience. It's okay. As long as you understand who you are and your mindset is not necessarily to quote unquote get stuck. I mean, you can evolve from there, however fits your need and your personality, whatever you see beneficial, right? I mean, if you have great stock options with a place you work and you see a path because the founders or the leadership cares about how your retirement is going to look like based on how much investment you put in the company, that's great. But if you see a problem that you want to personally solve, you shouldn't act on fear. You should just jump into the pool and execute your plan, right? I mean, even if you flop and you failed, I failed 3 different times before I hit it right with SetSchedule. And Zuckerberg did the same thing, and Musk and all of them. Everybody has a story of failure. But the reality of it is that, and I go back to the SEAL training story, is that I remember vividly, and I don't remember a lot, but I remember vividly the first week of SEAL training where we had somewhere around about 180 people standing in lines, checking in and starting bootcamp training. And that number turned from 180 to about 90 within a period of a couple of weeks. And I always ask myself during training, like, what's wrong with me? Why am I here? And why did they leave? Like, what's wrong with me? That was the mindset, right? And think about it. I'm 18 years old. And I realized that it's just the normal reaction of society. There are a tremendous amount of people that just act on fear and they want, but they don't do. So the bridge between wanting and doing is just the belief that you can do it and the belief that and just the action that you take to do it. Right. So, I mean, I can go on and on and I'll stop here. But ultimately, I mean, that's the progression was, I didn't think about the other failures that I had as the cushion job. I didn't have a cushion job. I worked for, technically speaking, myself for the last 18 years. So it just, jumping from one point to another with the belief that you're not going to fail. And like Cuban said, you need to hit it right once and then, you're fine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true, though. I mean, I think I listen a lot to David Goggins, who comes from a big military background. He talks about his stories through, Navy SEAL training and that kind of stuff. And he has this thing that I always revert back to, which is like the 40% rule, which is when you're uncomfortable, majority of the time people just quit, but they're really only at 40% when they're hitting that level of uncomfortability. And it's like, it is it's almost like a muscle, like it's a tolerance level that you can train to push a little bit more and a little bit more of your comfort zone, to get further and further out of that comfort zone till it becomes comfortable. And all of a sudden, you keep doing that for a number of years, you're going to look back and people are going to be like, how the hell are you doing that? Like, that would make them entirely uncomfortable, because every single time they get to 40%, they just turn away, right? But it's just continuing to push to getting to a point where, your level of comfortability is like uncomfortable for 99% of the people out there. And I think you can accomplish a lot more things and actually realize that the world and this life is a lot more of your playground more than it is, on a fear-based system. So I think a lot of your correlation back to the military and that experience does translate, I think, a lot over into the entrepreneurship world. And
100%. I mean, to your point, I mean, when we have a challenge that we have to deal with personally or corporately speaking in business, I always think about Hell Week. I mean, everybody knows Hell Week, right? I mean, and for those who don't know what Hell Week is, it's basically an ongoing Monday. It's an ongoing Monday because you don't sleep. So you don't know if it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. You just try to figure out how many times you saw the sun. But the reality of it is that I remember my dad told me before I went to training is that, remember, there is no single effer, right, fudger that can stop time. So, it's a Hell Week. It's not a Hell month. You just need to close your eyes, think about soda, think about the great cake, and just tell yourself, at some point in time, I will have it again.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's awesome. I like that. Because I think that's the thing. I mean, everybody just thinks that the pain is infinite when it's not. It's temporary, right? Whatever you're going through is always temporary, but it gets in people's minds where it's like, that is forever. Or, and that obviously is very hard when you quantify it that way, to then take those first initial baby steps to even just to get the ball rolling. Very, very interesting. So getting kind of back to SetSchedule, right? You first have this idea for it. You mentioned you have a couple of co-founders.
Yes.
So how do you, who comes up with the idea? Is it you coming up with the idea, how do you meet the founders? How do you end up getting, the formal processes of starting a business, right? Incorporating and all that kind of stuff. When does that happen? And in terms of that scope of finding the right partners?
Right. Well, the most important point is you need to understand if you have a problem, right? I mean, what is the objective, the challenge, and the problem you want to solve? And for us, for me, I realized that, hey, I mean, I came in from the real estate investment world and I've seen hundreds of properties that we bought, we traded, we flipped, we held, we rented. And at some point I realized that I want to expand into kind of like the franchise sales environment, or basically the agency sales model, to have multiple brokerages, whatever. Yeah. And I always think big, right? I mean, the dream is always big. Obviously there's baby steps to get there. So I always think big, and I say, okay, how can I have 200 offices or 20,000 agents, right? And so that was kind of like the foundation of it. That from there, the idea or the challenge came where we realized, when I said to myself, okay, well, if you have 20,000 agents and 500 offices, well, how are you going to sustain business growth? Because 20,000 agents, let's say, 10,000 of them are not going to be able to produce, 5,000 of them are going to try, and then you have the other 5,000 that may be successful. So we said, I thought to myself, okay, well, I need to have a scalable path. And Udi Dorner has been a friend of mine for many years, and we had this ongoing conversation. But before we had this ongoing conversation, I went to my wife, Shayna, which is the third leg in this conversation, and she got her real estate license, brokerage license, and we started the mapping the game plan. Sat down with Udi, and Udi came more from the technical world, and really bought into the idea of, let's really address this 20,000 agent problem. And let's find a way to not just count on the 5,000 that we know will be successful. Let's take the 15,000 that are going to struggle. And it's an interesting epitome in the space of real estate. And that's the reason why real estate defines our early stage DNA. But then Udi came with the very popular term in our company, or a story in our company. He said, why do we want to solve, or why do we want to do it just for a brokerage or our brokerage? Let's do it as a tech company, and let's provide services and the SaaS products and the expansion of our mobile vision to everybody. And that's where the idea became basically turned into SetSchedule and turned into more of an agnostic technology SaaS play, for lack of a better term. And from there, obviously, we grew and grew. So that's kind of like the triangle story of how we drove the founding idea of SetSchedule.
Okay. Very cool story. So let's go back to that time in your life when it was like the ideation and then having these conversations with Udi, your wife, formalizing what the business is going to look like. How many years was it from, or months, I don't know, but like from that point where it's ideation to like, your first hire, for example?
That's a very, very good question. So again, I mean, we're all about execution. What differentiates us that if we say we're going to do something, if we haven't done it yet, it's going to be done tomorrow. So that's our mindset. So it's the same thing with our ideation to execution path. I mean, the conversation started somewhere around September of 2014. And really between 15, 16, 17, we've done everything using very low-tech back-end only software. Basically, the founding clients were just receiving notifications, but they didn't have a front-facing mobile application because the mobile app came out in April of 2018. So between September 2014 to the first hire, I'd say there was maybe a month, right? I mean, and the first hire were marketing. Let's find leads for real estate agents, because the idea was to create a marketplace of leads, which was basically the birth idea of the referral radar and all of our patent technology around the referral radar. So we hired marketing, we hired telemarketers, we hired everything really low tech in the beginning just to get going and bring value to market. And surely enough, we brought value. Obviously, everything propelled itself in a different level the moment the mobile application went to market, but that's kind of like the timeline.
Got it. So you did like what seems like, I guess, like a non-scalable version of growing the business to get cash in the bank as soon as possible kind of deal, and just kind of this more, fragmented way to a certain degree. And then the mobile app came out like 4 years later. That's a more scalable product, right? So like once you came out with the mobile app, for example, what were like the early indicators of like, this is unlocking a lot of growth potential for us? Like what were some of those indicators that you guys went through as part of that feedback loop to get that validation?
Well, I mean, I'll give you one example, which by the way happened a couple of times in our history, but I'll give you the one, which is the funniest and the most notable one internally in the company. When we rolled the mobile application, one of the game plans that we had on the marketing side was, let's give everybody 3 free leads from the referral radar, so they consume 3 free leads, because our theory was that we want to be very economical and user friendly for the solopreneur, even if they got their license 2 hours ago. Right. So you can download the app, agree to the 20% referral fee agreement, activate a referral radar, and start taking online leads. And we wanted to even do a better, one better. And we basically want to give 3 free leads so you can also take them and not pay the nominal upfront fee per lead. And we rolled out the app, we rolled out the code, we deployed everything, and one of our senior engineers accidentally made a mistake and revoked that token, or for lack of a better term, didn't build the discount code right. So when we woke up the following morning, we saw a payment, and another payment, and another payment, and another payment, and another payment. And we said to ourselves, oh shit, did someone hack our merchant services or a banking system and is actually spamming or churning or defrauding basically our accounts? And we freaked out. And we really ran to the system to check the backend system and realized that it wasn't a fraud. It was just clients paying per lead. They're paying per lead because they're just taking the leads. And that was the validation. It was a proof of concept 101.
Yeah, for sure. And it came out of a mistake.
Yep.
That's awesome. That's a great story. So when people started you started realizing that so before it was like trying to do the 3 free leads, right? Like lure them into paying for product, right? So, but instead now, like people are just paying right out the gate, which is awesome. But like, so once you guys got that validation, like what was the team size like at that stage, like from, right before you rolled out the mobile app?
So it's a very good question. So before April of 2018, we were probably in a 30 people range. And then in between 18 and 20, we grew to about 150. And again, keep in mind, bootstrapping all the way, right? Fully independent organization with a very, very small board that is really mandated and managed by us. So again, so to answer your question, 100 to 150, somewhere around there, if I'm not mistaken, between 18 and 20, that was kind of the number. But the interesting thing is that, and I know you didn't ask that, but every time we roll out a major product, we learn probably 200 different things that we didn't do right, and we need to hire and solve for solutions. So we immediately hire more after we deploy a new product.
Got it. Cool. As you guys have been seeing this growth, I love the fact that this has been a bootstrap business, and I love the fact that you've only gone out to raise like venture debt and things like that. Do you feel like the fact that you guys didn't raise VC capital in the very beginning like helped light a fire to prove this out in a way that and now having other now obviously like proving it out, having some of those same people that you had conversations with coming back again to try to get equity out of the deals, like I'm just curious as to, like, in hindsight, do you feel like that was a big motivator?
Yes. Well, 100%. I was going to say 100%, 100%, 100% and cut you off, but I figured I'll let you finish the question, right? Because I thought you were going to say, are you happy with the narrative or with the roadmap of having the independence and making the decisions and maintaining the honesty to staying true to the DNA? But you went on and asked if that motivated us even more. So I mean, I guess the answer is yes, it motivated us more. But we reacted and managed and ran the business the same way as if that we had VCs, from day one. And the reason being is because what entrepreneurs need to understand is that they are the VCs, they are the investors. If you buy too much into this dream and this cover story of Forbes that you want to have VCs, then you're probably going to fail. I mean, there's a lot of good and bad with VCs, especially with early stage ones, because when you get an early stage VCs, you are getting outside money that it's going to not bring opinion, but bring tremendous amount of controls and limitations. Introduce a tremendous amount of limitations to the ability of your ability to run a business. And in many instances, I've seen friends that crash and burn just because they do capital. Because the VCs has a mandate, they have a certain speed that they want to get, and we didn't have that. So we did have the agility to maneuver around pivoting. Right. It's okay to start an idea, go in and run into a wall, crash into the wall, right? And say, okay, I'm going to turn around and find a door. It's okay. It's sometimes a little bit more difficult to do when you have a VC that has a mandate to their funds.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree with that. So, I mean, and I think a lot of times there is this exaggerated, I think, feeling about accomplishment, I don't know, that's tied to just raising capital, which I think is asked backwards, in my opinion. A lot of times it's like you need to go out and you need to get some kind of market fit validation so that you are in a position of leverage around whatever the business idea is, as well as like what you're trying to grow into and scale into. But being able to go into those conversations confidently, if that's the path that you choose to do, right? But I think it's more important to be in a position where you have choices and you have options, as opposed to thinking that this is the path, is like raising to then build the business. I think it's build the business first, prove it out, and then have the choice of. And in that case, I see a lot more successes, just because, at that stage, you can also negotiate for those rights of removing some of those mandates that might come, with the earlier investments. So 100% agree with you. Yeah.
And I don't want to be weird about it, but if I had to equate early stage VC to a different space, I would probably equate them to steroids in the gym.
Yeah. Fair enough. It's not sustainable necessarily.
Yeah.
Got it. So, as we're kind of like rounding out the time here, I do have one more big question, but you've accomplished a lot. You've gone out, you've built a business. Yes, you failed 3 times, but in this situation, I feel like you got to take a moment to just appreciate, and I don't know how often you do this, but I do think being able to appreciate what you've built so far. You're very much in a small percentage club of people that go out and try to start a business, let alone, surpass a certain time frame of like 3+ years, but also to do so in tremendous fashion of like having a team of 220 plus, like that speaks volumes. We're talking about less than 2% of people who go out and try to do this, like get there. But that being said, I'm sure that you are not complacent and you're not staying stagnant. So where do you imagine SetSchedule being in the next 5 years? Like where do you want to see this? Do you feel like, do you want this to be like a publicly traded company, or do you want it to just like, really focus in on creating more growth and more value to your existing customer base, and or expanding your customer base by like 5-10x? What does that look like for you?
That's I appreciate the question. Obviously, it's a great question when I get the opportunity to be vain, right? so first off, I mean, just I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, we received our outside evaluation and audit evaluation, and actually we received our great 9 digits evaluation, right? Okay. So, but interesting thing about that fact is that you look at the corporate enterprise evaluation and your 409As or whatever, and you look at them and you feel that, okay, this is good. This is it seems as if it's paper rich, right? And this company is definitely middle market, and it's going to become a unicorn. But you first off, your drive and your fire shouldn't die out. You should always be hungry. You should always drive forward. And what the goals are that we have and what drives forward SetSchedule, where we want it to be, to your question, is first off, we want to bring value at a much greater scale to the average Joe and Mary solopreneurs, right? That Salesforce.com may not even try to solicit because they don't have $100,000 a year budget to spend. So we want to address those millions of small businesses and solopreneurs and give them tech that they can get their client this month, and they can get another client maybe next month just by spending or investing $10, $20, $30, $40, right? So economical for the customers. The next goal is for me is cheesy, but Warren Buffett and Bill Gates made the most amount of billionaire around them. So I'm looking at the list of people on our cap table, and I want to know that everybody on the cap table 40 years from now or 50 years from now, some of them are very young, could turn around and say, my retirement was set based on my equity incentive program that I had from SetSchedule 50, 40, 30 years ago. So that's the second goal, the cap table value to our partner, our SetSchedule, our employees. And the third thing is, and that's, I'll leave myself for last. You ask, what my goal, publicly traded a company. Yes, 2026, publicly traded, that's the goal. My goal, the only way I can get my trophies is, I guess, lists. So I want to be on the Forbes list. That's my personal mission. And that's where I'm going to take this. That's where we're going to take this as a team.
Awesome. Well, on that note, I would love to have you guys back in the next couple of years here as you guys continue to grow and grow and grow. And that's amazing on the 9-figure evaluation. So, I think you guys are definitely on that trajectory. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time today and sharing your personal journey with us. I love the fact that, your military background, the immigrant story, coming to the US, not having anything really to fall back on other than yourself, right? Like, I think that's something that I think generationally speaking, like that we see kind of like at fault today, which is like, everybody gets a trophy kind of deal, and you don't learn failure and you don't go through failure, or your failures are sugar coated to a certain degree. And that there's a lot of character building in going through those experiences. And so I like the fact that you shared some of those things, and hopefully people pick up on that. And yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about it. So
I hope so too. Yep.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for joining us again. Great to hear your story, and best of luck in the next few years here.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.